So before we get into today's video, I want to put a brief disclaimer here because I know quite a few of you guys are already down in the comment section and they're like, no, dude, I've seen it myself. Check the patents of Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais or check the patents of John St. Clair, right? Like that's all the evidence you need. I know it's all real. Now, let me tell you, all this is addressed in this video. I've looked at it, I've broken it down, and I will explain it all to you in this video. So before you go down and just say, well, I know it's real, and you leave the video after 15 seconds, you might want to stay around and check out what I have to say, because there might be some things and facts and stories around these so-called researchers and people who filed these patents, amongst other stories around the TR-3B that you didn't know. So much for that. Let's get into today's video. So whenever I show Black Triangle UFOs in any of my videos, there's one comment that's reoccurring. That occurs hundreds of times, literally. And that is people commenting, well, it's a TR-3B. Bro, it's a TR-3B. I know it is. I'm 100% certain TR-3B. Why don't you know about this? And it's like, I know about this. But just because of these comments, I wanted to do a video breaking down the legend of the TR-3B. What do we know about it? Is it real? Is it not real? Is it a hoax? Is it made up? So these are some videos I want to show you guys that often get these comments, right? You see it down here. That's a US TR-3B Black Ops ship. Okay, it's like when you show a video like this, that is the most posted comment. People are just convinced that they know exactly what this is and that this project is most definitely real. So here it is, triangle hovering over a city. There are more videos like this, right? Like there are literally countless videos of black triangles. I'm sure if you're into UFOs, you've seen this before. Countless videos of black triangles being spotted in the sky. Here's another one, very recent, recorded by Al Jazeera in news coverage, broadcasting what looks to be like a triangle-shaped object shooting down rockets over northern Israel. And this is a weird one, right? Because in the beginning, it doesn't look triangular at all. And then somehow these dots align. And it can just be the artifacts of the film. It, in the end, kind of turns out to have a triangular shape. In this particular case, look, many airplanes also have triangular light configuration, and you can't really see that it's a triangular shape here, right? Of the object itself, you just see the lights kind of emulating the triangle. So I don't know about this one, but there are so many, right? There are literal countless amounts of videos that show flying triangle. This is one that I've debunked separately, by the way. I'll try to find the video for you guys and put it down in the description, so in case you want to know what we were looking at here. So the TR-3B, and this is an artist's rendering, right, which I think is amazing because this would not fly, okay? But the part of the legend of the TR-3B is that it is not like the TR-3A, which used to be a real turbojet-powered plane. We know that. There are articles in Aviation Week about it, and, you know, Northrop has confirmed that it was about 42 feet long, 14 feet high, and the wingspan of 60 to 65 feet. So we have fairly compelling data about the TR-3A, but the TR-3B is really shrouded in mystery. Does it really exist? Obviously, lots of UFO believers seem to have intel from behind the scenes of the industrial military complex in the United States where they're like, yeah, I know it. I've seen the TR-3B myself. And this is, by the way, on a side note, another comment you see a lot. Whenever there's a post about TR-3B on Reddit and on Twitter and so on, people are like, yep, it exists because I've seen it myself. Okay, I have seen this flying triangle that looked exactly like in this video, and so on. So people are convinced that when they see a flying triangle, it has to be the TR-3B. And part of the legend is, and why this object that you see here would be flying, is that it is supposedly powered by a reverse-engineered anti-gravity drive. So it would not fly like a traditional airplane. It would be powered by an anti-gravity device, which most probably would be falling out of back-engineered alien technology, right? I guess that is the claim that a lot of people believe. Now, in order to really understand where this legend comes from of the TR-3B, we kind of have to go back a little bit, because a lot of the mythicism around this object, around this craft, came out of the whole Operation Paperclip legends, right? That's where it originates from. Obviously, if you don't know what that is, Operation Paperclip was kind of a post-World War II operation that the United States did conduct. Like, this is not some conspiracy. This really happened, where they tried, or they absorbed around 1,500 German scientists and engineers in order to propel, you know, their engineering efforts and put themselves ahead of the competition. And that spawned a lot of these mythicisms around wonder weapons, gravity devices, nuclear mini reactors that power airplanes and so on. A lot of that stuff came out of it, and then obviously being fueled further by the Cold War following up from that, leading to a lot of these myths like the TR-3B. Now, the challenge for an anti-gravity drive, if you speak to real scientists, to engineers, to people who know about these things, is that If you want to power an airplane at the size of what the TR-3B claims to be, it would need a massive amount of power to run. It is not impossible. Nobody says that it can absolutely not be done. The theories exist, and we're going to get to that in a second because patents have been filed that claim to have solved all these problems. But the amount of energy required to run a drive like that is at the moment almost unobtainable. But then again, as I said a minute ago, Lockheed Martin does have filed patents for cold fusion reactors, for small containerized cold fusion reactors that they say could be small enough to fit into a fuselage of an F-16. Here is one of those drawings of a containerized cold fusion reactor like that. And this is not the only example of these kind of quite obscure out there science fiction-y patents that have been filed by Lockheed Martin, but also by the US Navy. Like in and around 2020, the US Navy filed a whole series of extremely unusual patents for seemingly science fiction-esque technology. So those patents exist, they can be accessed, they can be looked at, and they contain ideas like gravitational wave generators, all the way over to space-time modification, weapons, and they all have one thing in common. There's one common denominator amongst all these patents, and that is the person who's behind it. And that person is Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. I hope I do. But a lot of these patents, these science fiction-esque patents that do exist, all trace back to that guy. And here's a few of them, right? This is just a small selection. Craft using an inertial mass reduction device. This is a patent. It has a patent number. Piezoelectricity-induced high-temperature superconductor, high-frequency gravitational wave generator, right? So it's like, wait a second. If all this stuff exists, right, all these patents exist and they have been filed through this man, this Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais, some of them through the US Navy or through companies like Lockheed Martin, surely this got to be real, right? This stuff has to be real. There's also this Navy PowerPoint slide that has been made public through the Freedom of Information Act request filed by The War Zone, a famous website that looks at stories like this. And I mean, check this out, right? Potential uses. What is the Navy's potential use for this invention? He's breaking down one of these inventions. Imagine your Navy ships, submarines, aircraft, and armored ground vehicles being powered with safe, reliable, virtually limitless fusion energy. Imagine the power of the sun confined in a compact, relatively small space. With the plasma compression fusion drive, PCFD, this figment of imagination becomes a tangible reality. The present invention can produce power in the gigawatt to terawatt range and even higher, with input power in the kilowatt to megawatt range, and possibly lead to ignition plasma burn. Under uniquely defined conditions, the plasma compression fusion device can lead the development of a space-time modification weapon, SMW, a weapon that can make the hydrogen bomb seem more like a firecracker in comparison. Extremely high energy levels can be achieved with this invention under pulsed ultra-high current, ultra-high magnetic flux density conditions, blah, blah, blah. And then in bold down here, there is a potential for commercial use. Yes, there is. And I mean, clearly, right, the way he says up here, we're taking something like the hydrogen bomb and make it look like a firecracker. There's definitely potential for commercial use. This looks like a pitch to me, right? Whoever put this together, and I mean, I work on a lot of pitches, maybe too many, but it is very clear that whoever put this together is trying to sell this in. This person is trying to sell it in. He's not saying, we have it here, please look at it, it's on the table or in this warehouse over there or whatever, go over, take a look. He's like, the theory exists, we can make it happen, there's totally potential for commercial use, and it will make the hydrogen bomb look like a firecracker. And he gives a few more use case examples down here of how this could potentially be used in like jet engines, intergalactic space drives, and okay. So when I read this, I was like, I don't know, man. This makes me skeptical. Okay, I get it. The patents exist. I get it. There is this Salvatore Cezar Pais doctor guy, and he files all these patents and has all these wild ideas. But where is it? I mean, if this would exist, and some of this stuff is old, right? It's not like only from 2020. Like some of this stuff is back from the 90s. So it's like, if that would really exist, I get it. The Navy and the military, they want to keep some of these things behind closed doors, right? It's their own technology that in case of a war could give them the decisive advantage over the enemy. But at the same time, if they would hold technology like that, I think at some point we would probably see some use case, some commercial public use case application for these things, because it's always like that, right? Whenever they have technology that is locked behind top secrecy and so on, 10, 15, 20 years later, you know, people take photos of the craft and it slowly comes out, and at some point the technology is used in wider applications in the military and in public life. So this made me skeptical, okay? But this man, Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais, has very noteworthy supporters, okay? It's not that he's like this lunatic in some kind of garage throwing out all these patents. Like, for example, Chief Technology Officer of the US Naval Aviation Enterprise, Dr. James Sheehy, is supporting him and speaks positively about him. And he says about these particular patents and these inventions, China is already investing significantly in this area. We would prefer that the US would hold these patents as opposed to paying forever more to use this revolutionary technology. And he asserts that this will become a reality. But note what he says there, right? He says, well, the main objective of these patents is that we don't want others to file these patents, which then will lead to us having to pay for them, right? If we come up with the technology and other nations as well, like China owns the patents, for example, and now we want to build these fusion drive airplanes in the future, we will have to pay these licensing fees, you know, to them for everything we build, and they make so much money off us. We don't want that. We want to own the patents and then avoid that we have to pay forevermore to use this revolutionary technology, as he says. And this, amongst a few other patents that have been filed, and we'll address them in a second, is kind of the argument that you see very often by TR-3B and UFO believers making in Reddit threads and so on. People are like, well, here's a link to this patent, here's a link to that patent. It's got to be real, right? These patents exist. You go Google Dr. Salvatore Cezar Pais and you will find the truth, right? This is kind of the narrative. Well, there are some oddities about Pais' work, okay? And that is, for example, that these patents are all public. That is not the usual case because the US military has reserved the right to file patents that are not available for the public viewing since the invention of the Secrecy Act in 1951. So there is no reason for them to put these patents out there and make them public. Yet they are. Also, there is no evidence out there that any of these patents ever manifested in functioning physical technology, even till today. Keep in mind, as I said, some of this stuff is old, right? It's 20, 30 years old, some of these patents. There is simply no evidence that any of these patents ever manifested in a functioning physical piece of technology. It just doesn't exist. And on top of that, obviously, in some of these patents, he has pages and pages of maths trying to communicate how this technology would actually work and manifest. And looking through this, I mean, I'm not a mathematician and I'm not an engineer, but looking through this, many scientists and engineers, generally the scientific community, is very skeptic towards it. It's not that they read this and they say, oh, this is brilliant, dude, what a great mind. A lot of this makes so much sense. They are very, very skeptical. And I want to read you a quick quote by one of those scientists. Okay, this is Carl Willis, a nuclear engineer and reactor supervisor at the University of New Mexico, who is actively working on the development of an advanced, dense, plasma-focused fusion neutron source for the Army, told the War Zone that Pais' work contains inventor jargon, nonsensical statements, weak or absent evidence of an informed theoretical basis, an overabundance of nebulous adjectives and adverbs instead of meaningful quantities in technical writing, and loads of statements made in passing that seem to contradict basic and accepted physics. So that sounds like the dude lives in a science fiction world. He just makes this stuff up. Right, he's like, well, maybe it could be possible if we just break this one law of physics. If we could bend gravity, then and it's like, yeah, but we can't. We don't bend gravity. It's just not a real thing. And then there is one more big patent that TR-3B believers often come back to and say, well, this clearly shows it's got to be real because of this. And that is that in 2004, an inventor named John St. Clair filed a patent that is very reminiscent of what now people claim the TR-3B to be, right? And it looks a little bit like this. This obviously is just a screenshot. You can also access, and I'll link this down in the description, the full patent, okay? It's on Google Patents, and it's fairly detailed, right? He's giving us all these, technical drawings and how he imagines it to be. And for someone like me, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a mathematician. I look at this and like, wow, this is pretty convincing, right? Here we're talking, I don't know what this indicates, like how gravitational devices work. I'm making it up as I go along, but this stuff, for me, as an outsider, is pretty convincing. And that's not all of it, right? You can go down. He has all his claims, all the mathematical calculations down here, trying to prove his claims and so on. So again, for someone who's not really in the field of patents and so on, you might look at this and be like, wow, okay, this is, how could you deny this level of evidence, right? This guy has formed the patent for the TR-3B, so it's got to be real. Well, again, you got to look a little bit deeper. You can't just look at this one patent and be like, well, it has to be real, because the fact is that this guy, John St. Clair, has filed many other patents over the years, many of which relate to seemingly alien technology, and many of which have now been abandoned, okay? Just like this one. The status of this patent is it's abandoned, which means it never was made, it never came to fruition, it is very theoretical. That's basically what this means. And again, people try to underline their point and try to be convincing on websites like Reddit in threads about the TR-3B, and then you get comments or replies like this one. This guy says, I'm a patent examiner, okay? That is a publication. This is not a patent. Every application is published. That particular application did not receive a patent and was abandoned by Mr. St. Clair. And he continues to say 99% of the time applicants abandon an application because they no longer feel they can overcome the rejection by amending. Say you invent something, you make an application, you get your first non-final, and it says you didn't actually explain anything as to how your invention works, etc., and you decide that the examiner was right and you aren't able to properly fix that deficiency, your only real option would be to abandon it. Okay, so again, this is a patent examiner, someone who does this professionally. I mean, he claims to be that. It sounds like it on Reddit, but it makes a lot of sense, okay? And the patent factually has been abandoned, as you've seen. So it's just an application. People would then be checking the credibility and feasibility of that application and say, bro, what are you talking about? Anti-gravity? How are you going to overcome these challenges? And then he's like, well, abandon it. Okay, so the fact that this exists doesn't mean anything, really. It means I can go tomorrow and file a patent for an anti-gravitational device or engine, right? And it's an application for that, and then they're going to question it. And then I will say, well, but that application still exists, right? You can find a website where I have applied with a bunch of fancy graphics and mathematical equations for that anti-gravitational device, but that doesn't mean it's real. And just when it comes to the St. Clair guy, I want to give you a few more examples of patent applications that he filed throughout the years, okay? So some of them include a training system for walking through walls, an electric dipole spacecraft, a hyperspace torque generator, a magnetic vortex wormhole generator, a full body teleportation system, a remote viewing amplifier, this is my favorite, or a water energy generator. And to date, none of these patents have resulted in actually any working prototypes. Okay, so whenever you see people saying, well, just Google John St. Clair, okay, and his patent, that should give you all the evidence you need. It's like, actually, if you look a little bit deeper, it crumbles, okay? It crumbles into pieces. Because what many people don't know or conveniently ignore, who knows, is that for these kinds of patent applications, you don't legally need to present a prototype to file an application like this. You can just, like I said, file an application, and then it will be scrutinized and questioned and then most probably abandoned. But anyone can file any application for any patent, really. Like you could just make anything up, you know, I mean, like he did. A remote viewing amplifier, a wormhole generator. Do you know what I mean? It makes no sense. The dude makes nice fancy graphics and stuff, but it's just very, very outlandish. And obviously he's not the only one who does that, okay? It's actually fairly common. If you go on a search on the internet, you can find so many obscure patterns made by so many different people. It's a pretty common thing, like, I don't know, this one. Propulsion system using the anti-gravity force of the vacuum and its applications. It's like, oh, okay, let me guess. It's also been abandoned, right? Because people are just making stuff up. People make stuff up, make it sound cool, and then they file for a patent, hoping to get through with it somehow. And again, unbeknownst to so many people, there's a long history of this. Like here's an article, I can link it down in the description so you can check it out yourself, but the long, strange history of people filing flying saucer patents, okay? It goes all the way back, even to 1927, when people conceptualized and filed for patents for a device that predicted the infatuation with flying saucers before they even had that name, okay? So people have been filing obscure, unrealistic, abandoned patents forever, okay? It's been going on for a very, very long time, and it is pretty common. So knowing all this, what is the conclusion? Where do we get to? Well, I think what we can definitely, without a doubt, say is people are seeing black triangles in the sky. I'm not saying that any black triangle a person sees in the sky is not real and they, I don't know, they're all hallucinating or whatever it is. I mean, there's so many videos floating around. It is a somewhat real phenomenon, and what's also real is that the government does work on secret projects, right? They work on secret and new ways of propulsion for aircraft, new designs, they're exploring all that. So it's a real thing. But the claim to know that it's a TR-3B is extremely far-fetched. Unless you work within the Groom Lake facility and you're like a high-level engineer and then you make that claim, now I'm listening. But as we all know, the people who make these, well, it's a TR-3B claims under Reddit and Twitter posts are not that, okay? So you're not doing yourself any favors by saying it's a TR-3B, bro. You can link to articles and you can say, it could be something like this. I don't know, but to state it as a fact is bizarre and obscure at best. Also, the question comes up, like, because a lot of people say, well, I saw this thing and it was flying over a field in Ohio in 1998. It's like, why would the government fly this extremely classified object, right, that uses a new form of propulsion over a field, over residential areas, right? This is the reports that people often claim, it flew right over my house, bro. Like over woodland areas. Like to what? To spy on you there? Like, bring out the TR-3B, bro. We got to spy on Steve in Ohio. It makes no sense. Again, often I try to put these things through like a logical filter of common sense. Dude, these sightings make no sense. And beyond all that, we do know that the United States has craft like these, right? We do know that the United States and many other governments fly drones, okay? They fly drones that have very obscure shapes that do look like, I don't know, some kind of boomerang thing. They can be triangular. There are many different designs. We know this kind of stuff exists, okay? And that's the big difference. The TR-3B, we don't know if it exists. It might be in some hangar somewhere. Maybe they're working on it. Maybe we don't know. We don't know. That's the point. We have no freaking idea whether it exists. But the aircraft I just showed you, we know they exist. They are real, they have that shape, they behave in a very similar way, and like the video we watched at the beginning, right, of Al Jazeera, they are used in war zones. It's also like, oh, here we are in a war zone somewhere in Israel, right? Like, bring out the TR-3B to shoot down those rockets over, or these missiles over Israel. It's like, really? But it's the perfect use case scenario for a drone, right? If you have a drone that's equipped with the right weaponry, it might be absolutely used over an area like Israel, over Gaza, or whatever. So I guess the conclusion of this video is just be cautious when you claim you know what the TR-3B is and that it's real. Because you don't. Most probably you don't. No matter how much you look through these patents that have been filed and through the evidence that you can find online, there is no evidence. As it always is, there is no evidence. And that doesn't mean that not somewhere a craft, because we know, again, the TR-3A is real, that there is a craft somewhere that is triangular and is titled, working title TR-3B or whatever, that it doesn't exist. But the point is, you don't know. I don't know. We don't know. I believe you see these triangles, but I would advise to be a little bit more cautious when claiming it's a TR-3B. And I know for sure it's obviously a TR-3B. Anyway, that's just my take, guys. That's my opinion on the whole story. That's where my research went to. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, or you learned something, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel for more. I would hope to see you in another video. Also, if you want to discuss this further or tell me personally what you think of my videos, then join our Discord. The link to that is in the description. I would love to hear your thoughts either over there or down in the comments. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care of yourselves. I'm out. Bye.